This is the film symbologist. Welcome. In this video, I will take another look at the character of David and the role he plays in the plot of the 2012 science fiction film Prometheus. Much of the story is driven forward by the actions of the android, and for good reason. He knows a lot more than the other members of the crew, and they depend upon David for many things. This video is part of an ongoing series analyzing Ridley Scott's film. If you haven't seen previous installments, I suggest watching those. In a previous video, I discussed the influence of T.E. Lawrence as depicted in David Lean's 1962 film, Lawrence of Arabia. In the beginning of both films, Lawrence and David are seeking meaning to their lives. The deserts of Arabia and LV-223 offer these characters an opportunity to discover their purpose separate from following orders from their superiors, who are British Army officers during World War I in the case of T.E. Lawrence, and are Peter Whalen and the human crew members of the exploratory Prometheus ship in David's case. Lawrence and David seek independence from those who give them orders, and from the orders themselves. These characters are determined to define themselves unburdened by others' expectations. As Lawrence and David begin their expeditions into their deserts, they must carry out their duties as assigned, but as time passes, their agency increases. Lawrence begins to empathize with the Arab cause in the conflict during World War I. It seems that David may also begin to identify with the engineers on LV-223. At one point, Lawrence ceases communication with the British military and goes rogue. A similar moment occurs in Prometheus, when David cuts his feed to Whalen Corporation representative Vickers as the android explores the Juggernaut. In a previous video, I speculated that the engineers' cause may have been to flee their inhospitable moon and colonize Earth using the black goo. This would imply that the Arab cause to which Lawrence was empathetic was to colonize the West. That wasn't the Arab cause in the conflict. Their cause was independence and freedom from outside control, just like Lawrence's personal goal and David's. If not colonization of Earth, perhaps the engineers' cause was actually to seek freedom and independence from humanity. The engineers may have felt responsible for mankind, and humanity may have depended upon the engineers to some extent, as depicted in the so-called star maps. Under this view, the black goo may have served to help the engineers and humanity achieve independence from one another. Similarly, a black liquid in the Arabian desert may have assisted Arab independence from outside interests, whether those interests were the Ottoman Empire a century ago or Western powers today. Oil may have helped achieve a level of Arab independence, but it may have also attracted a new kind of attention from the West. And isn't it also the black goo that attracts the attention of Peter Whalen to venture to the desert moon world in Prometheus? In the beginning of the film, Lawrence completes mundane tasks at the behest of his superiors, and he feels unfulfilled. Over the course of the film, his influence and importance grows. Lawrence becomes a key figure around which the entire story revolves. Lawrence is successful in helping Arab tribes to unite and fight against the Ottomans. Ultimately, T.E. Lawrence plays a central role in mediating between British military and political interests and Arab leadership. However, his efforts to help the Arabs achieve full independence from British interests are less successful. British duplicity in wanting to weaken the Ottomans while also growing its own influence in the Middle East hampers Lawrence's ability to mediate. Ultimately, Lawrence is left disillusioned when he returns home to England after the war. In Prometheus, David is ordered to complete mundane tasks like handing out towels and making drinks by his human superiors, and he feels unfulfilled. Throughout the film, David's importance to the story grows. At the film's climax, David is mediating between Peter Wayland and the engineer. The duplicity of the Prometheus mission may have caused David's mediation to fail. The crew believes their mission is a scientific expedition for existential knowledge, but this is merely to conceal the mission's true purpose, which is for Wayland to acquire the secret to immortality from the engineers. Perhaps the last engineer was able to sniff this out. That Peter Wayland and Elizabeth Shaw are communicating separate interests further illustrates the connection to Lawrence of Arabia, that neither the crew nor the audience can understand the engineer's language and cause outside of what David says solidifies the parallels to the dynamic between the British, the Arabs, and T.E. Lawrence. But who are the Ottomans? In Alien Covenant, David carpet bombs Planet 4 with the black goo. Perhaps this is akin to Lawrence's efforts to assist the Arabs fight the Ottomans. David may be avenging the LV-223 engineers by attacking their rival faction and enemies who live on Planet 4. Lawrence's role as a mediator between the British and Arabs helps the Arabs gain independence from the Ottoman Empire, but not from the British Empire. In the end, Lawrence returns to England disillusioned. In Prometheus, David is the mediator between the humans and the engineers, but Wayland's cause, unlike the British, does not prevail in the end, and David, unlike Lawrence, does not return home. Instead, David's adventure continues. In addition to David's story continuing beyond Lawrence's, the android's role is also more expansive. A clue to David's full role in the film Prometheus is hinted at numerous times. In a previous video, I looked at the plot through the lens of Greek mythology. I compared LV-223 and the engineers to Mount Olympus and the Olympian gods, and I compared Pandora and her jar to Shaw and the vases of black goo. There is an important deity from Greek mythology that I left out of that video. Hermes is an Olympian god that plays a vital role in both Greek mythology and in Ridley Scott's film. Throughout various Greek works, Hermes is described in a variety of ways. He is the patron of gymnasia. Hermes is the bringer of dreams. He is described as a robber and captain of raiders. He is a trickster figure. Hermes is also the messenger of the gods. He can convey messages between the divine realm, the afterlife, and the world of mortals. Hermes is the one responsible for guiding deceased human souls from Earth to the afterlife. He carried the caduceus, a staff with two intertwined serpents wrapped around it. The staff of Hermes is said to have the power to wake the sleeping and put the awake to sleep. When Prometheus steals fire from the gods and gifts it to man, Zeus is furious. As punishment to man, Zeus orders the creation of the first woman, Pandora. The gods each imbue her with different qualities. Hermes gives Pandora the gifts of lies, seductive words, and a dubious character. Hermes is also the shepherd god who acts as a shepherd to men. It is said that he would carry a lamb around the boundary of a city and sacrifice the lamb to the gods in order to purify and protect the city. It was believed that the sacrifice of the lamb would benefit the city's inhabitants. Hermes is the keeper of genealogy for the Olympian gods. These descriptions of Hermes should offer some insight into the depiction of David. Some of the seemingly bizarre things that David does should make more sense once you understand that the android is Hermes. In Prometheus, David is shown riding his bike and playing basketball in the ship's gym. He watches Shaw's dreams. The android raids a vase from the engineer's tomb on LV-223. David tricks Holloway into ingesting the black goo. He is able to understand the engineer's written and spoken language and communicate this to the members of the crew. The android ferries the human characters from Earth to LV-223, where all but one dies. David wakes the crew members from their hypersleep chambers. He also wakes the last engineer from his cryosleep pod. And, in a sense, the android is responsible for sending the awakened crew members to a permanent sleep. David wishes Wayland luck on his journey to the afterlife. He has secret knowledge that he does not fully convey to the rest of the crew. David shepherds the crew to LV-223 and ends up offering them to the engineers to be slaughtered as a kind of sacrifice. In Alien Covenant, David offers up the beings on Planet 4 and the members of the colony ship Covenant as a sacrifice to the xenomorphs. He acts as a keeper for the genealogy of the xenomorphs, recording detailed notes about his experiments and safeguarding the embryos on board the Covenant spaceship. In classical Greece, it was thought that Hermes' offering of the lamb to the gods cleansed and protected Greek cities. But in that scenario, was Hermes' act really the one that brought salvation to the city? And in Prometheus, did David's offer of the crew as a sacrifice to the engineers result in Earth being protected? Wasn't it something else that actually protected our planet's inhabitants from the black goo in the 21st century? Are the engineers even gods to whom sacrifices ought to be made at all? What exactly is the deacon xenomorph? And back in the 1st century, what was it that happened on LV-223? An outbreak? Should lambs be sacrificed to the gods to protect places? Are executioners heroic figures? What role would you want? The passive citizen of a city who benefits from the slaughter of lambs to appease gods? Hermes, the shepherd who carries the lamb around the border of a city, and the high priest or executioner who slaughters the lamb? The God to whom the lamb is sacrificed? In what role would you least desire? That of the sacrificial lamb? If given that role, what would you do? Would you resist your fate? Would you flee into the wilderness? Or would you willingly accept your destiny? With the information presented in this series, it can be reasoned that the engineers are not gods to whom sacrifices should be made, and LV-223 is not Mount Olympus. David has ferried the Prometheus crew to some other place. In future installments in this series, I will further explore LV-223. What happened there 2,000 years ago? What the black goo is? Who the engineers are? What the xenomorphs are? And what they represent? And who the lamb is. If you enjoy this kind of content, like the video, comment down below, and subscribe to my Patreon and YouTube channel. This is the Film Symbologist. Thank you for watching.